I hold multiple titles now. I am the curator of African American history here at the Fredericksburg Area Museum, as well as the vice president of programs and interpretation.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So I just want to say that this is a practice tour. I'm going to share with all of you, because most of you know me pretty well, this has been a really hard week for me, as it has been for many of you, personally and professionally. So I want you all to please approach this with some kindness and some flexibility, as we are still all learning together, okay? You all know me, you know how I work, you know that I take my work very seriously, but sometimes the world is hard, and I need a little bit of extra care from you all too, okay? All right, so I want to talk a little bit about what this tour is going to look like. It's a little bit different than some of the tours that I usually have given. As you all know, in 2023, I debuted a walking tour entitled Black Businesses and Entrepreneurship in Fredericksburg, 1787 to the present. That was in partnership with the Historic Fredericksburg Foundation. In 2024, we did the Sparking Freedom Tour, which looked at enslaved resistance throughout Fredericksburg and Stafford County. And this year, I'm actually going to be debuting one by myself later this year. That's going to be about Black churches in Fredericksburg. But for Black History Month, we wanted to try something a little different. You all know that I believe a lot in community-led interpretation. I believe a lot in letting people speak for themselves. You don't always have to listen to me talk. And so today, I am very thrilled to introduce my friend Keith here, who has agreed, after a lot of me talking at him, to co-lead this tour with me. I'm going to let Keith describe himself, because I again don't want to speak for him, but the tour is going to look a little bit different and more collaborative than the other tours you've probably taken with me. Each stop, I'm going to give you a basic overview of the history, and then I'm going to turn it over to Keith to lead more of a conversation, to talk about his perspective as a person who lives here in Fredericksburg, grew up in Maryland, and to invite you all to share with us as well. So it's going to look a little different. Again, you're going to have to bear with me. We have a lot fewer stops on this tour than we have in the past, and that is so we can have more time to talk to one another. But I also have no idea how long this is going to take us, so please be aware. And if it runs longer than you were anticipating, please don't get mad at me. That has happened before. So I'm going to hand it over to Keith now to introduce himself, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the auction block. Keith?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Glad you guys can join us on this beautiful Saturday. Like I say, a couple of years ago, I saw Dr. Sims down there doing one of those celebrations that does. And I said, oh, I'm curious. Me being from Maryland, I didn't think Fredericksburg had such a rich history. Because you lie between Richmond and Washington, D.C. and Maryland. And so she was thinking about doing a walking tour in collaboration with community. Talked to my wife, I'm like, I want to do it. A couple of years rolled past. I see her again. My wife, her ladies are, go ask her. So she did that. So me, I'm like, okay, I'll go ask her. And I procrastinated. She was right. She emailed, you sure want to do it? You want to do it?
I asked. He's not here under duress.
No, she asked me want to do it. I said, and I was telling her that it's good for the community to lead and to understand more, because in life, as everything's going on, we need to know more for the kids. So when she told me, I'm like, let me know when, I'm there. So here we are today. That's about it. That's again, coming back to Dr. Sims.
All right. So all of you know the story of the auction block, because you live here. You've heard me say it 1,000 times. But for the real tour, I will be talking a little bit more about the auction block. But I'm going to go ahead and, hi, welcome. I'm going to go ahead and do kind of a quick version of the auction block story. So as you all know, the auction block associated with the sale of enslaved people here in Fredericksburg is the reason that I'm here, the reason that you are all here. That object between 2017 and 2019 sparked a lot of community conversation and led to the creation of my position as curator of African American history, and led to all of the projects that I've been able to do in partnership with many of you over the last several years. So even though I did get that promotion, I still will always hold that title. That title is very important to me. It's very important to the city. And Sam and I have talked a lot about how just because I'm taking on new responsibility, we are not abandoning that title or the work that we promised the city and all of you to do. I do want to share some exciting news about the auction block. Many of you know, some of you are on this committee, it is led by Eto Odetigbe, who is an incredibly amazing artist and designer. He is the one who is responsible for the UVA Memorial to Enslaved Laborers. And he will be coming later this month to start getting to know all of you in anticipation of building that installation. So please spread the word that the project's happening. We've hit a couple of roadblocks, but we're still going, and I really hope all of you and your networks will show up.
Mention one thing in our intro, which is that this tour is non-chronological. It's based on location, not by timeline. So that's why we're starting with Mr. Johnny. But what this mural and this wayside panel let me talk about is the wayside panel project that we're doing. So we are standing in front of the wayside panel that the city installed last year in February, related to Johnny P. Johnson, which was arranged so that it overlooks the incredible mural over there of Mr. Johnson. So for those of you who don't know, Mr. Johnny P. Johnson is one of the most important and iconic members of the Fredericksburg community. He was originally born in North Carolina in, I'm bad at dates, so I'm checking, 1936. And he came to Fredericksburg as a way stop. He was going to teach for a little while and then keep moving to New York City because he wanted to be a famous artist. He instead met Esteem Blackstock, you can see right here. They fell in love, and he spent the rest of his life here in Fredericksburg. And I think we're all very lucky that those two met, as well as their two kids, Patrick and Thomas, who are both around Fredericksburg and really wonderful stewards of their father's legacy. So when I arrived in Fredericksburg a couple years ago, this mural behind me was crumbling, not because the city didn't care about it, but because they picked a weird bad wall, honestly. And so what has happened in the last year and a half is that the community has banded together to raise funds to redo the mural. They hired the same artist, Bill Harris, to redo the mural, and then we put this wayside panel so people who don't know who Mr. Johnson is can read a little bit more about it. The last thing I want to say before turning it over to Keith is that we are working, so we put in 5 new panels related to Black and Indigenous history for the city in 2024, and then there were 5 new ones installed at the University of Mary Washington, led by Christine Henry, in part. I knew she'd get mad if I just said it was her. And we have plans for at least 5 more this year in 2025. We're going to be putting up 2 new ones related to Old Site Church, which we'll talk about in a second. We're going to be putting up 2 new ones at the city docks. There aren't.
Look at my backpack and get my
but we're going to review those.
speaker.
Kind of update some of the language.
I turned it on.
And then we have plans for 2 new ones related to Indigenous history as well. One
Seen one
related
of
to
those.
Lake
Same
Ray,
ones.
and one related to a Civil War regiment that was mostly Indigenous people. So please keep an eye out for those. They're coming, and please know that we are working very hard to get these stories
Turn it on.
So for now, I'd like to turn it over to Keith to talk a little bit about your reaction to this work.
Okay. For me, it's very important to archive our history. It's important for us to tell our story. And then I have a small daughter. Everything. Like I never knew I never knew who he was. Like I said, I didn't think Fredericksburg. Only thing I knew about Fredericksburg was the Civil War, but I didn't know it had a burgeoning Black community. I did not know that. So I started talking to Dr. Sims. So it's important for my daughter and everybody kids to see this, that it represents us. Art represents us, how we see ourselves. Like I said, it's very important to tell our story, to tell our own story, not somebody else to do that. So when I was doing a little more research on John, I'm like, wow, Johnny did a lot. I guarantee you she didn't know it, or the kids around here doesn't know Johnny. So I'm putting the onus on you guys to tell that story. To tell. Each one teach one. To tell that story. And so, like I said, I'm glad she showed me this and just reading about what Fredericksburg have to offer, because I did not know. That's about it. Dr. Sim.
Thank you, and I think that's one of the things that I care the most about from my position. You know, I try to talk to as many human beings as I personally can, which is a lot, but I hope that through the work we've been doing at the museum and at the city, we've been able to bring in more people to share the stories further, invest more into this work, and feel like they have ownership of it too. Do you have any questions or anything you want to share about Mr. Johnson or the mural or anything else related to what we've been talking about?
Great beginning.
It is a great beginning. We got a lot of work ahead of us.
I knew Johnny almost all my life. He lived right across the street from my great aunt. So he's always been teasing me and things like that. But and I know his sons play musical instruments. One of his sons plays with my wife when she sings. So
Wow.
Sheldon.
yeah, Johnny. Well, he was a big help to us because he painted many paintings and he gave my great aunt several of them. And Johnny was always a good man.
A local
He's a
hero.
local hero.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very important.
I think one of the things that strikes me about him, and I never got to meet him in person, I arrived just before he passed, is that he showed kindness and care to every person he met.
He was a bridge.
He was, and so we can all carry that on. He's not here anymore, but that kind of directive can all be part of our
This one? Did it turn it on?
Yes, it should be.
Church and a little louder. I interviewed him once at Shiloh, I think it was. And back in the 60s, after Martin Luther King's death, there was a possibility of a riot here, and he and some of the other men stopped it. Talked to the young men.
Really?
To,
Yeah, I remember.
report
Yes,
that
yeah.
riot.
Wow.
Yeah, the possible riot.
So we did a memorial march about that.
Yeah.
And he and Hashman on there. Well, Hashman said he was the one that stopped them from doing some damage to the city.
Well, every
Great
time
lives.
you pass this mural, I hope you think about Mr. Johnson and his impact, and it helps you think about how you can help other people. All right, we're going to keep going and talk a little bit about Shiloh Baptist Church's old site. So I know many of you know the story associated with this building, but I'm going to tell you anyway, so sorry. During the period of enslavement, Baptists gathered together here, not in this building, but right by the river, on what is now Sophia Street. At the time, black and white Baptists both worshipped in the church, but their seating was segregated. As you might imagine, this site is pretty precarious given its closeness to the river, and so it flooded several times. And ultimately, the white members of the Baptist church decided to vacate this building and build a new church, what is now the Fredericksburg Baptist Church on the corner of Princess Anne and Amelia Street. They then sold this, not this building, but the building that was here, to the black members of the congregation who were free and enslaved. He's going to talk a little bit more about that in a second, but I'm just going to give you the overview. In 1886, the building became unstable because it had flooded over and over again. And so members of, at this point, the black church, which at one point was called the African Baptist Church and then became Shiloh Baptist Church, decided to vacate this site and move to a new site on the corner of Princess Anne and Wolf Street. However, it took a while to purchase and then build the new property, so some parts of the church started worshiping back here at what they called the old site. This eventually sparked friction with the faction that was intending to build and settle on Princess Anne Street. It eventually went to court, and the judge ruled that there be a complete separation of the entity called Shiloh Baptist Church, and that one would be called Shiloh Baptist Church Old Site, which is the one here, and the other would be called Shiloh Baptist Church New Site, which is on the corner of Princess Anne and Wolf Street. Does that make sense to everybody? So when I first got here, people kept saying, "Oh, I go to Old Site, I go to New Site," and I was like, "Is that the name of your church?" And then I figured out that they were just saying the back half of the longer title and referencing that history. So now I'm going to turn it over to Keith to talk a little bit about the importance of church in African American communities in his life specifically and in general, and then I'll finish up by talking a little bit about Reverend Hester and Reverend Davies.
Okay, it's funny. Dr. King said the most separated day throughout the week is what? Sunday. Find that true. So I'm curious. I'm gonna do a check. So African American friends, when I do this, what does this mean? Huh? I'm in the church. Say it again. What I'm doing? Stepping out. Stepping out. See, you're stepping out. What is that? The non-melanated people didn't know that. Okay, that's what they mean. So that comes from, especially when we had to separate the slaves or the enslaved versus the Caucasians, that this was right here to let you know. Remember, she said they went to church together. If I'm doing like this, to let the master know I'm moving from one side to the other side without escaping. So if I do this, I'm moving head over here for permission. Okay? But yet we still incorporate that today. When we go, we do this. We do this in church to move, to go. We still have that. Also, ushers. Talk about ushering. Ushers wear white gloves for what? Why do ushers wear white gloves? Ushers wear white gloves and put one hand behind their back because of what? Because remember, they were still serving. They did not want the enslaved people to think they were stealing the money. Or also, they didn't want to think that their hands be dirty touching the money. So when you see ushers do this on the side, it comes from that. It comes from that. Okay? But yet we still incorporate that in church today. Go figure. Also, notice that at the time, there always was a Caucasian guy in church to oversee what was going on. Okay? How did black churches get over that? They put a Jesus up on the wall. They put a Jesus up on the wall to see that. And you see that most some of the churches, especially, I talk about this in Sunday school union, we still have that today. We still incorporate that type of pastoral legacy today. And we don't know why we do certain things. I'm a type of person, I'm going to ask why. Why? But we still teaching that. This is something legacy we still have in church today. So next time you walk in a black church, you see you doing this, you see why. You see you got the white glove, you see why. You see some person do this, you know why. I go to Dr. Sims.
Yeah, I think what is super compelling about that, right, is there are these traditions that stem from enslavement that we still incorporate in our day-to-day life. And I think it's a reminder, right, that those legacies are real. Those are symbolic legacies. So there are of course, so many real, difficult legacies of enslavement that we're still grappling with. So I think this is a reminder of those. So I just want to wrap up really quickly here by talking about Reverend Hester and Reverend Davies. I know many of you know them. You're going to hear it again. And actually, you'd be surprised how many people, when I do these tours, people who are from Fredericksburg, who don't know a lot of these stories, not because they're not trying to learn them, it's because they just haven't been available in the literature. That's my point. So Reverend Hester was one of the longest running pastors of Shiloh Baptist Church Old Site. He was here for many decades, and he started the Shiloh Herald, which is a newsletter that would go out, especially during the period of segregation. So Hester served, I told you I'm bad at dates. He served here starting in the 20s, so he was here for about 40 years, 22 to 1960. And so he started the Shiloh Herald so that people in his community could have a way of understanding what was going on around the world and also in Israel. At this point, there's the Freelance Star, right? But this isn't necessarily a newspaper that's super hospitable to Black or African American communities. So starting that method of communication, something that the church still does, was a very important part of his practice. He also is the grandfather of Ambassador Pamela Bridgewater, who many of you know is a very important person here in Fredericksburg, still alive. The wonderful comes around when she has time. She's very busy. She was appointed an ambassador to Benin, Ghana, and Jamaica under Bush, Clinton, and Obama, and is a really amazing figure in our community. And she wrote a book about Reverend D.H. Hester, which is available at the Visitor Center if you want to go read it. It's not very long, but it's really compelling. And then the last person I wanted to mention, somebody who probably everybody knows, Reverend Davies. So Reverend Davies just beat out Reverend Hester for the longest running pastor of Shiloh Baptist Church Old Site. I think he did just a couple years longer than Reverend Hester, which I'm sure is very important. He was also, I mean, I would want to beat the longest running record if I was him. He was also elected to the Fredericksburg City Council and then became our city's first Black mayor in the 1970s. He is a beloved figure, and we just lost him last year. And his wife, Janice Davies, is also a really important figure. She also passed very recently. She started the Fredericksburg Area Civil Association. I always like to point her out for labor. She's an incredible person too. And as much as Reverend Davies' name is synonymous in Fredericksburg with being mayor and being important, you got to always remember the ladies too. And so please keep in mind that Janice Davies is just as important as Reverend Davies. Does anybody have any questions or anything that they want to share about Shiloh or about the reverends and ministers that we talked about today?
one thing about Shiloh. During the Civil War, this was used as a hospital. And one of the reasons why that wall in the back failed was because of all of the activity during that time.
Oh, that's a really good
And then when
point.
they split the two Shiloh, actually Shiloh new site, the building is actually about a month older than this.
Really? I didn't know that. See, this is why we have other people in the tour to tell me things.
So my grandfather went to this church, but all of my rest of the family from here went to Shiloh new site.
It's a big decision.
Oh yeah. Big
I'm gonna try to talk a little bit louder so hopefully everybody can hear me. I talk way too fast. I'm from California. I try really hard to slow it down. It's really hard for me, so I promise I'll try. So we are standing in one of my favorite parts of the city of Fredericksburg by the Rappahannock River. Those of you who know me personally know that the river holds a lot of importance for me. And this river specifically has been the site of some very important moments in African diaspora history. So we are not at the city docks. I need to make that very clear. But we do know that slave ships came up the Rappahannock River. We know that they often stopped on the west coast of Africa, specifically what is now Ghana, but other areas too. Some of them stopped in the Caribbean first, and then came here to drop off enslaved people and sell them. They did not stop right here. They stopped further down the river at the city dock. I didn't want to make you all walk that far. So for the purposes of this tour, please don't tell people I'm telling you that this is where the slave ship stopped. So it was a site, this river has been a site of enslavement, of fear and terror for enslaved people in this area. But it is also a site that has been associated with freedom. We know of at least 10,000 people who crossed from this side of the river to that side of the river in 1862 to get behind Union lines and to free themselves. We'll talk a little bit more about one of those people, John M. Washington, a little bit later. Oh, it's much colder by the river. Okay, we'll be faster. I just felt it off the land. Oh no. Okay, I forgot. That wind coming off the river is cold. Okay, bear with me. Talk a little bit more about John M. Washington in a second, or not in a second, when we get to it later. But the most important thing to know is that this river has been both the site of fear and violence, but also the site of freedom for Black people. And so I live across the river, and every day I come across this bridge, and I think about the stories that I know of people who died in this river, crossed it to freedom, who used it as a source of joy, who used it as a source of sustenance. It means a great deal to our history, and I hope that you, when you see it, you think a little bit about these stories too. And now I'm going to turn it over to Keith.
Okay, so especially the water. Water has a very special and complex relationship with African Americans. So when Dr. Sims said it calls from one side to the other side for freedom, especially the Christian, the Jordan River, it's remember the Jordan River. To me, that when the slave was crossing from one side to the other side to get away, it's basically crossing over the Jordan River to basically symbolize the spiritual rebirth, salvation, and freedom from oppression. Okay, spiritual renewal, place what you call cleansing, preparation, and enter to a transition. So the river is very important to us. The water, we cross it from one to the other side. You know the song like crossing over the Jordan River. It's very spiritual and cleansing. Also, I want to say that with that, it's funny because the song you hear about a lot of spiritual Negro songs. One of the songs I like to play, which I had to get it right. I had to get it right. Come on now. It's funny when I played this at the house, it was good. Now I don't want to play. Okay. It's very important that we use this. Because remember, some Africans or enslaved never got over here. They was tossed over in the ship. So we have a very complex history with water. But for us, when we become baptized, we come underneath the water, signify the renewal, a transition, a new me. So when the slave went across here, from here to over there, from here to over there, it's like we're here, we're free. It's very, very, very special. So sometimes I know I sit back and I wonder what it looked like 10,000 people crossing over. So something that every time we take stuff for granted, that we see it every day, but understanding what our forefathers or ancestors went through itself is also, like I say, certain people trying to erase this history. It's on us to keep it. I'm gonna keep preaching that. I'm gonna keep preaching that. It is up to us, not just us, everybody, to keep doing that. Okay? Preach it, say it. Don't let them erase the history. Do not let them erase the history. Because 25 years it takes 25 years for people to become illiterate and don't know. Because like for instance, my daughter, her don't know, for example, to where we used to get on an airplane and just walk up to the terminal, right? Before 9/11. They know nothing about that. And they forgot about that. We forget about that to where we used to wave at grandmamas as we go by grandma on a plane, but right now we gotta go through all the two. I said, we can't even do that. And they don't know nothing about that. So this is very important that we keep up the history and keep telling our story. I said, Dr. Sims.
I think we forgot to say something really important, which is that Keith is a minister.
I'm sorry.
I forgot to mention that, so you could be prepared for what kind of ministry
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's good. That's what we want. I'm just saying, this is also, specialty. Does anybody have anything they want to share about this river? Go ahead.
Robert and Kathy Kravitz. The more we know, the more we can see. And to add into what you've said already, what we are looking at across the river here is what was the largest refugee camp of formerly enslaved, self-emancipated black people between April the 8th, 1862, and 14 months later, June the 12th of 1863. This was a vast Union encampment of over 100,000 Union troops who would parade here, their Confederate counterparts often on this side, exchanging goods with formerly enslaved, trying to get across, sometimes fearful of going across. And for those 14 months, this was the division between freedom and slavery. We're developing on both sides of the river historic initiatives. But what we're looking at here, we are only beginning to get a sense of the importance of this very place. This is enslavement. That is freedom. 14 months from 1862 until just before the Union and the Confederates went up to converge at Gettysburg.
Thank you. I think that's a really important addition, because the reason we do walking tours is because of the physical connection to the landscape. I can lecture in a room all day and I show a lot of pictures so that people aren't bored, but there's something very specifically important about being on this site, knowing who was here before us, knowing we're now part of this site's story. We're now part of the river story. So these are just things. Yes, go ahead, Melina.
I want to talk about the secret code.
Oh, yes, please do.
I love it.
So, a husband and wife, Lucy Ann Walker, and her husband Dabney, escaped from a plantation, I don't know which one, and she went to the Confederate side as a laundress, and he was on the other side as a scout, and she would launder the clothes and put them on the clothesline. Certain positions told him where the army was going.
Okay.
And certain colors of clothing told him who was there. Longstreet and various other.
Gotcha. I love it.
generals.
I love it. I love it.
I
Okay.
plan to do her play at your places. Thank you, Melina. I think one of the things that we'll be conveying, I'm going to talk more about the exhibit that we have coming up at the museum, is the fact that Black folks during the Civil War were just hanging out waiting to see what's going to happen. They were actively involved in everything. They were fighting, they were scouting, they were supporting the Union Army. They were doing all of the chores that still needed to get done to take care of people. Black people have been involved in every bit of this place's history, and that's what we want to make sure people remember. All right, we're going to go up the street now, and we're going to talk about one of my favorite guys, Mr. James Wilkins. Okay, so I'm going to rely a little bit more on my notes for this one because there's some dates I want to make sure I get clear. We're talking about that building right there. 800 Caroline Street. And this is one of the less known stories, I think, I'm sharing today, although some of you have heard it at the Black Museum before. So, in the early 19th century, a man named James Wilkins was enslaved by James Young, who was the owner of the Farmers Hotel, which stood here at 800 Caroline Street. At the time, the Farmers Hotel was the leading place for travelers to stay in the city. We know that the Marquis de Lafayette stayed there when he came to visit. Maybe he got to interact with James Wilkins, although I can't say that. So, Young, who was the enslaver, rented a space nearby, we think back there, for Wilkins to practice as a barber, with proceeds earned going back to Young. I'm saying their last name because they won't name James, and I don't want to. In 1823, the rented space became a casualty of arson. We don't really know anything more than that. And the next year, Young freed Wilkins, setting him up as a barber inside the Farmers Hotel. Wilkins became very successful, placing an advertisement in the Virginia Herald, which I don't have with me today, but at the other tour I'll have it with me, that called himself, quote, a professor of shaving, adept at haircutting, and a connoisseur at perfuming. The full ad is really great, and I'll make sure you guys see it. He stocked his shop with hair dye and coconut oil. Wild that is still, like he was doing that way back then. He also offered to help bald men regrow their hair. And Wilkins' business did so well that he was able to buy several other properties, including a house on Hanover Street, a tavern at the corner of Lafayette and Princess Anne, and several lots in Liberty Town. More importantly, he was able to purchase and free a woman named Betty Wilkins. Cannot figure out if this is his wife or his sister, but either way. His son John, who was enslaved at that time in Mississippi, and his two daughters who were enslaved here in Fredericksburg. He purchased and freed them all in 1838. So Wilkins used the money he earned from his business to free his family, and then he tried to use his influence to improve the lives of Fredericksburg. In 1838, that same year, Wilkins, along with several other important free black families, Nancy Madison's favorite people, the DeBaptistes, signed a petition asking the Virginia State Legislature to create a school, to allow the creation of a school for free black youth in Fredericksburg. We have a picture of that petition from the newspaper. Their arguments were compelling, but the legislature said no. And that, we think, led to many of these early free black families to move out of the state of Virginia, move out of Fredericksburg and Virginia. So, again, we don't know, but we can fill in some gaps. We know that James Wilkins experienced significant financial difficulties that same year, 1838. We don't know for sure, but it's likely because he spent so much money freeing his family members, and he eventually lost all of his financial and property assets. Don't worry, he landed in D.C., and there he made a name for himself, so much so that he was appointed the chief butler at the White House by President John Tyler in 1841. Wilkins had his own office. His son and daughter worked there with him, and apparently he was a really big deal and people loved him. Following the end of Tyler's term, he moved to Philadelphia, started another barbershop, and that is where we believe he died in 1850. So that is the beginning of the story. Now I'm going to let Keith follow up with any thoughts he might want to share.
Question: how many of you guys knew about that story? Me neither. Me neither. Like I said, I didn't think I was really surprised when she was telling me the story, because we did the walking tour. She was telling me, I did not know. Now, she's not going to like me because she said her worst subject is history. I'm like, really? Really? I think she does this on purpose. I know she does it on purpose. Yeah. and I know she probably I know when I get home, I'm going to tell her probably write up a page about this, what we talked about, because schooling not just Monday to Friday. It's every day. So you can thank Dr. Sims for making you that one page. Okay. But honestly, I didn't know anything about this. Just that self-determination, going back to get the family. So that's something that we always did. Like I say, I didn't know anything about this.
Well, those stories are deliberately kept apart. And to this day, we're struggling. Every time we bring those stories together, somebody pulls them apart. This this is not going to end quickly.
Uh-huh.
We're going to be fighting the effort to keep the races separate for longer than we like. It's going to take an effort of everybody on and on. It's never going to end, I don't think. We may make it better, but we can't, I don't think we can erase it.
I'm sorry, and that's what make America supposed to look up to is our ideas. This wonderful melting pot. That's a beautiful thing. It's supposed to be that way, at least on paper. But that's why they say Dr. King said that according to the Constitution, we all created equal. Through Christianity, I'm gonna make you live up to that creed, one way or another. But that's what make a beautiful thing about America. So when I see you guys here enjoying the tour, it's not just Black history; it's American history too. People forget about that.
Amen.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to share is, the world is scary right now. And what I get to do as an historian is I look back and it's been scary a lot of times. And people like James Wilkins, the Baptiste, many of you, and all the other figures we're talking about today, going. They kept fighting. So all we need to do is look to them and know what the answer is. Keep fighting and taking care of each other.
Amen.
All right, we're gonna go up the street where hopefully we'll get some more sun. We're gonna go to the. All right, where's Michaela? There she is. Okay, so this is one of my favorite parts of Fredericksburg. I know some of you know these stories, some of you might not. But either way, it's still fun to talk about them, even if you know them backwards and forwards. So we talked about old site. This is new site. Shiloh Baptist Church new site, which is, if old site's one of the oldest, new site's also one of the oldest Black churches in Fredericksburg, and then Mount Zion, which is right there, kind of rounds out the three of the oldest Black churches in Fredericksburg. I'm not going to talk specifically about new site. We kind of went over that, but happy if you want to share stories or anything like that in a little bit. What I do want to talk about is how this block between here on Wolf Street and the train station, you can kind of see the train tracks over there. In the mid-20th century, this was a thriving Black business district here in Fredericksburg. So we had new site, and then there were two Black-owned hotels, the biggest in the state of Virginia, that were each included on the Green Book. On this side was the Hotel McGuire, which was built and owned by Dr. W.L. Harris, who was a dentist and just a really important Black entrepreneur, a businessman in Fredericksburg. Within the Hotel McGuire was Hotel McGuire Beauty Shop. There was a dining room. There was a cab stand. It was a really important kind of center for Black business. Across the street was the Rappahannock Hotel. It was on this side. Let me remember what that guy's name was. Sorry. I know so much about Dr. Harris that I lost the one who opened the Rappahannock. That was oh, I don't have it written down. I'll tell you later, I promise. Practice. Practice.
This is a practice.
Sorry. There was the Rappahannock Hotel. So these were two of the biggest Black-owned hotels in Virginia. Further down the street, on the other end of the block, closest to the train station, one of my favorite places to talk about is the Paris Inn. The Paris Inn was a beer garden. It was a bar where people came to listen to music, to hang out, get into some brawls, and have a good time. So what's important about this location is that at this time, there's the train station, right? Yeah. And then there's also this, which was Route 1 at the time. And so there were Black folks coming from all the way up in Quantico, from Fort A.P. Hill. They're all converging here because there's not a lot of Black-owned businesses in this area, specifically not bars where soldiers can hang out. And there's also a lot of important musicians that are stopping here on the Chitlin Circuit, which you may know about. And so the Paris Inn was all the way at the end. We had a record shop owned by one of my favorite figures, Mr. Sonny Dyson, who was the first Black policeman here in Fredericksburg. We had Brown's Funeral Home, one of the most important Black-owned funeral homes in Fredericksburg. We had the two hotels, and we had New Church. There were a lot of Black families that lived here on Wolf Street. So thinking about the convergence of all those things in this area. Now, you look here today, and you don't see a lot of those places. New site's still here, which is amazing. The Hotel Rappahannock, the Hotel McGuire, the Paris Inn, these places were all torn down and destroyed between 1979 and the early 1980s. We no longer have access to them, which is devastating, and she's going to talk a little bit about that in a second. But what I want to say is now all of your job to keep those stories in your heads and your hearts. We know that this was a thriving Black business district, and that Black people have always been amazing entrepreneurs in Fredericksburg. You gotta, it's your job now to keep that in mind. And now I'm gonna turn it over to Keith.
Like I said, I didn't know that Fredericksburg had a burgeoning what you call Black Wall Street. I didn't know that Fredericksburg had a burgeoning Black Wall Street and the separation of things. I didn't know this. I did not know this. So it's funny because every once in a while at the Fredericksburg Expo, they have a flea market. So one of the things I picked up from a flea market, I surprised her this morning. She didn't know I was going to bring it. One of my things that I have is like I said, I'm too young to experience this, but people of certain age may have stuff like this. Okay, see, you see. Okay, now I got this, like I say, the flea market, and I like antique shopping. I don't know why I love it, and so the guy who sold this to me, this is like $20, $10. I'm like, really? So I try to gather everything up. Okay, this is rare. You're not going to find this too much anywhere at all. This is very rare. Of course, you have this one. This is really touching history because I'm not old enough to experience this at all. But it's havoc. Like I said, they want to erase this. This is living legacy. Public swimming pool. This is living legacy. If you look closer at this, this is called Negro Ocean Grounds. You know what they used to say about little black babies and alligators. They used to use them as bait. Stories like that. And so you see this. You see this. You see this. So you might see me at a flea market just looking up everything, try to snatch everything up. That's what they call a Black Africana. And I do that. This is my personal collection. And this is, can't forget. I have, that's my wife, have a lot more at home. You have a lot more at home. So I just can't forget. And where's my daughter at? She knows that. Dad, y'all was talking about this.
Are you going to make them at least visible to folks by having a website or a link?
I didn't think anything about that, but it's a good idea.
People need to see this.
Yeah, I didn't know that because it's funny. When I also went there, I have a doll baby of Gone with the Wind of what's it called, Manny? It's a little doll baby that's still in the box. I said they were selling this. I snatched that up too. I snatched everything up. So I have this at my house, and I'm like, it's funny because I believe everything works in a divine order. So with an opportunity for us, for Dr. Sims and I to collaborate, I'm like, thank you, Lord. Bam, here we go to share this. So yeah, so like I say, keep preaching this. That I didn't know that Fredericksburg had a for lack of a Black Wall Street, and it's gone. It is gone. So I'm proud to do this with Dr. Sims on the first day.
Still here.
Yes.
If you walk down these streets, there's big chunks of the neighborhood are
Still there. So yeah, that's about it.
Are you guys going to mention Urbane and this and that?
Not on this tour. That wasn't as much as I would love to tell you every single thing I've ever memory keepers. There are lots and lots of Black community members who just collect stuff that they know has important historical relevance. Museums have not always valued those objects, and so it has been left to people like Keith. My dad has his own collection to keep these objects safe. I know Yvette has her own collection. So I think all of you probably know this, but the way that I do my museum work is based not just on best practices in museums. It's not just based off of the American Alliance of Museums, guidelines. It's based on these traditions of collecting and valuing, and that informs how we do our work. It shows that the work that Keith is doing, the objects he's collected, the stories he collected are just as valuable as the stories that the museum has been collecting for a long time.
Well, I know you're doing the photographs and scanning, but that seems to fit
I
right
think
in,
so
doesn't it?
too. We're actually applying to a big grant for that right now, so don't worry. The wheels are turning. Okay, I'm gonna. Yes.
There's some things that I grew up with when I saw that. I was born in 1961, and I was in the military when I turned around 40. I started thinking about things that happened while I was a child. And one thing is, I'm from Newport News, Virginia. I'm from Newport News, Virginia. My mother used to take us across the city of Newport News, where downtown, we catch the bus, we go to Woolworth, and we would eat hot dogs uh, outside on the stand. And I always thought that was because she wanted to be outside. I didn't realize
She
that
couldn't.
she
Couldn't
go
go.
outside.
Ooh, yeah.
So that was something I didn't realize that until I turned like 40.
Wow.
That was the
Yeah.
reason. Another thing, we had this beach called Buckrow Beach. And Buckrow Beach, one side was black and one side was white. I didn't realize that we couldn't do that until I was in my 40s. I think our parents just kind of, did the things but didn't really talk about those things. So, I try to tell my children that they're in their 30s now, almost 40. So I try to tell my children these things, and it means nothing basically to them right now. But it's important for them to know so they can remember.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Well, I'm about 10 years older than her, and when I used to come down here, my parents gave us that lecture about not being able to do anything when you come in. You have to follow the law completely. And I think once one of my uncles got in trouble for fireworks.
Wow.
And they put him in jail for it.
Fireworks.
For fireworks, yeah. But yeah, because I can tell you since I work at the park, now I've been at the National Military Park in Fredericksburg since 2005. And recently, probably within the last 5 years, we did put up signs talking about the Green Book, and also that it was, when you brought those things out, the handicapped bathroom up there used to be the black bathroom.
Wow.
Colored only. And now there is a sign telling everybody that up until like the 1960s, it was like this.
Wow. Thank you. Wow.
Okay, one important thing is Tanya came through and she already said it was Arthur Brown that owns the hotel. She tells me she does it for them, but I guess I get the benefit today. All right, I want to show you all this picture really fast, and I'm going to keep going. So this wayside panel was put up before I got here to Fredericksburg. This work has been happening before I got here. I just get to continue it on. But what you can see here is an image of what this block looks like. You can see the Rappahannock Hotel here, and you can see the Hotel McGuire over here. When I do this tour later in the month, we'll have more photos, but I just wanted to show you. So now you have something to actually picture in your brains when you think about this incredible...
that man was sitting right there.
Mm-hmm. So you have something in mind when you think about this incredible block and the incredible people that were here. And man, selfishly, I just really want to stay at the Hotel McGuire. Like, how cool would that be? It's okay, I'll just imagine. Any other questions or comments here?
It's funny. One of the things that when we go take road trips, I need to know my grandmother always packed a lot of food. And I'm like, Grandma, we got McDonald's, we got this on the way. But that's how she grew up. And I'm like, we get to stop in person. I'm part of the ancestors that fought that. I get to stand on those shoulders. And I didn't know, well, I'm privileged. I didn't understand. I'm like, wow, we go to this McDonald's, we go to Burger King. But for them, they had to eat their food. I didn't understand that. Now I do. I'm like, wow, how things have changed and stuff. So it's like we get used to doing certain things. My wife and I we were talking about this. How many of you guys went to go to Corral? Go to Corral. Remember, Go to Corral used to be a non-smoking section and a smoking section. So my wife and I, we laugh about this. When we walk in, we still go to the right because the left was what? Smoking. There's no more smoking, but we still go to the right and stuff. I say that to say that we still do a lot of things that we have learned and stuff. Don't know why we do it. Now we just do it because that's what Grandma did it and stuff. That's what my kids said. Well, I always go to the right. So we had to explain that story to her. Yeah. Go ahead.
You know how Michael Jordan's father got killed? He was sleeping in his car.
Mm-hmm.
And he's an old gentleman, so most likely he's accustomed to that because the hotels are not open.
Wow.
Hotels are not open.
Wow.
So when I heard he was sleeping in his car, I'm like, he can afford a hotel, but just habit.
Habits. Wow. Yeah, wow.
But a lot of people don't know these things. They didn't grow up these ways, so it's our job to make sure that we understand what these memories mean. All right, we only have one more stop.
The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions. The revolution will not show you pictures of Nixon blowing a bugle and leading a charge by John Mitchell, General Abrams, and Spyro Agnew to eat hog maws confiscated from a Harlem sanctuary. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by the shape of...
Hospital. Can everybody hear me? Okay, so we talked earlier about the 10,000 who crossed the Rappahannock River in 1862. And one of the most important figures from that time is Mr. John M. Washington, one of my favorite stories and humans from Fredericksburg. So John M. Washington was born enslaved here in Fredericksburg, and he actually was enslaved to a woman who lived above. At that point, this was a bank. He was enslaved to a woman who lived on the second floor of this building. So we think his window was either that one or the one on the other side. He was enslaved there and separated from his mom. His mom and his siblings lived down the street for a while, and then they were taken to another enslaver who was in Stanton, Virginia. John M. Washington writes about how horrible and difficult it was to be separated from his mom and his siblings that early. And the reason we know so much about Mr. John M. Washington is that he wrote a slave narrative later in life. It's called Memories of the Past. Thank you. And it has been published. It is widely available now in 2 different books. David Blythe's A Slave No More, which is really great. David Blythe's a really important historian. And then in Crandall Shiflett's John M. Washington's Civil War. John Washington's Civil War. So you can read the narrative for yourself. It's only maybe like 45 pages, but it's really compelling, and it shows you what it felt like for John M. Washington to be enslaved as a child right here in Fredericksburg. I'm not going to tell you his whole life story, even though I want to because I love him, but I'm just going to fast forward. In 1862, John M. Washington is here downtown in Fredericksburg. He is still enslaved. He's working at a bar called the Shakespeare House. And as you all know, there's news spreading that the Union Army is advancing south from D.C. and coming this way. Fredericksburg clears out. All the white folks in Fredericksburg freak out and start leaving. Many of the people who have more money go to their other homes in the country, and John M. Washington's enslavers tell him, John, the Union Army is going to mess with you, so you should come hide out with us. We'll protect you, essentially. I'm paraphrasing. Please don't tell people that this is actually what he said. Then John M. Washington, one of my favorite things, he says, you're totally right. I'll join you. Let me lock up the bar. I'll meet you out there. Thanks so much for protecting me. Instead, he brings all the other servants to the bar. They have a drink together and goes to the Yankees' house, and then he heads to the river. He heads to what is now Old Mill Park, which we cannot walk to, but I think many of you know what I'm talking about. And he and 2 other black men, one's free and one's enslaved, I believe. Stuart can correct me if I'm wrong. And they call across the river to the Union Army soldiers who are like, you want to be free?
Union called over to them.
Thank you. The Union called over to them first, then they called back, and they said, and John M. Washington said, yeah, let me come over, let me be free. So he comes across the river. You're good. See the fire truck jacket? I told you, so cute. We were talking about it earlier. So John M. Washington self-emancipates in April 1862. In my favorite portion of the memoir, he says, I think I have the full quote. It's my favorite. I was going to paraphrase.
Good Friday.
Yes.
It says it's the best Friday.
It's the best Friday. Yep.
I want to try to read his actual
April
quote.
18th, 1862.
He says, it was Good Friday, indeed the best Friday I had ever seen. And so every Good Friday I always think about John M. Washington. His story didn't end there. There's a little more stuff that's happening. He ends up, the Union Army ends up retreating. John M. Washington's no longer safe because at that point he wasn't officially free. The Emancipation Proclamation hadn't been issued yet, or hadn't gone into effect yet. And so he ends up having to flee to D.C. by himself. His wife Annie was pregnant at the time. He had to leave her behind. But it's okay. They all reunite after the war. John M. Washington, his wife Annie, his mom's new husband, they all get to come back together in D.C. So I'm going to leave it there. This amazing placard was put in last 2023 or 2023. And it is here because this is where John M. Washington was enslaved. It's a beautiful reminder of his story. And many of you know that Foodie is co-owned by two women, Beth Black and Joy Crump. Joy Crump is an incredible chef. And I get to tell you all this. I just got permission. She's now running for city council. So if she wins, she will be the first African American woman to be council person in Fredericksburg. Anyway, that's all for me. Keith, do you want to anything?
I know we right here, right? I know nothing about this. We ate right there. I didn't know anything about this. So when she tasked me with like looking stuff up, and I like to look at the character of the person. Who is that person? And it said this on the book. And from what I gather from him, if John Washington was here today, he'd be a politician. From what I gather, he had the gift of gab. He was a smooth cat. So basically, this is what I gather how he could tell his, go ahead, you go down to the country, we're gonna be fine. And they believed him. To follow up though, they say that he used to hang out with his relatives, black and white. He had free range to look like. I'm like, wow, because as you know, the African American community, some black folks did pass. They don't want to talk about it, but some of them did pass and stuff. But he was fully he was colored, as they call it.
Yeah.
Very light. Very light. So he could have passed. Yeah, they didn't know that. Wow. So yeah, he couldn't read and write. Yes, and so because I was reading some of the stuff how he was writing, how he phonetically spelled. I'm like, okay, but like I say, my wife came here. I didn't know anything about that. So I definitely every time I come eat here, I believe you said you got a poster of him or something back there.
Yeah, in the back room.
Yeah. So yeah, that's about it for me.
Thank you. I think
I did a tour about him. Building up and there's really the bathroom on the other side.
Wow.
A really little bathroom.
Really bathroom. So I'm asking a question. So
it's a bathroom, yeah, it's a bathroom.
So human beings today in 2024, are they larger than what they were 100-some years ago? Wow.
No, you still have some really big people.
Yeah. Really? Wow.
So the average size is about
5'8". Okay. 130. Wow. Okay.
all right.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you guys for allowing me just to walk with you guys, to learn, to get to know each one of you guys, to learn about Fredericksburg. I'm just a community guy that when she asked, and I was like, okay, I'll volunteer. Spend my Saturdays just to get to know more what place I live at. And this is my first time doing any of this. Very first time. And so my wife told me I couldn't sleep at night. I was just so anxious. She said, you can't sleep. I know, I'm just so anxious to do this. And I said, this is one of the things I can actually check off my bucket list. And so I check that off with you guys. So I want to thank you guys for allowing me to share and walk with you guys through living history.
Alright, so please feel free to head out if you'd like. Please feel free to hang out if you'd like. I'm available for to answer questions if you have them. I think Keith is too. Thanks again.
Another hand for Galen.
Thank you.
I think you found another calling.
You really did, bro. Thank you. That was fun.
Great
Yeah, thank you. That was fun. Thank you so much. That was fun.
We're glad we came.
No, I'm glad you guys. Thank you. Honestly, thank you.
I don't know if it's gonna be enough of it.
Okay. Thank you.